Meeting at 11:05 a.m. We shall have roll call.
All right, so Chair Chris Gans. I
Present.
see there he is. Vice Chair John Burr.
Present.
Robin Schambach.
Present.
Eric Barrett.
Present.
Bill Viner.
Present.
Kathleen Erickson. Wasn't going to join us today. I don't know if Zach, are you on the line today? No, Zach. All right. And then the design professional, Richard Fay. Are you present?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So we do have a quorum, Mr. Chair. We can move to item number 2.
Item number 2, case number IID-20-03. Method Coffee.
Sorry, Chris. Sorry, Chris. We have to do the legal action report first. You're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Now, item 2 is review and approval legal action report for the September 9th, 2020 meeting.
And I will drag this over real quick here so you guys can see it. If you needed to take a look.
It looks okay, but I wasn't there, so I'm abstaining.
Anyone else feedback on the legal action report?
No objections. I would approve.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve? Second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye. Well,
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Who seconded the motion?
I made the motion. I didn't. I didn't second it.
I'll second it.
Okay.
John Burr abstention.
All right, thank you.
Ready for item number 3?
I think we are.
Case number IID-20-303, Mata Coffee, and their related activity numbers with this T20SA 00303, T21 CM 01999, DP 20-0196, 509 No 6th Avenue, C3 zoning, downtown Link subdistrict, 6th Street sub area. Okay, next is
Mr. Chair, members of the DRC, I just want to mention that Zach Baker from the Downtown Partnership just joined the meeting. He's the new ad hoc member representing the Downtown Partnership.
Okay. And first on the agenda after this is preliminary staff remarks.
Yeah, so the applicant is proposing a change of use to an existing building on the northwest corner of 6th Avenue and 6th Street from a previous use of automotive repair to food and beverage and personal service. The proposal includes adding a 1,796 square foot covered outdoor patio to complement the food and beverage uses on the site. Their request through the IID process is a reduction in motor vehicle parking, a alternative to the solid waste and recycling collection, and a reduction in the landscape and screening requirements. The design professional has reviewed and approved this proposal. And Mr. Chair, if you're ready to turn it over to the design professional, we do have Richard Fay Tom on the call today, and he is available to discuss his approval and answer any questions.
Okay. Richard Fay, you're next.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I don't have my notes here in front of me.
Faye, I have added your approval recommendation on the screen. So if you want, I can scroll through this as you discuss. If you like.
Okay, that'll be fine. Okay, so with regards to the streetscape and the requirements for the IID zoning, the pedestrian orientation, we went through all the variables that were there and found that they complied with that. The shading part of it was also in compliance. The next one is parking. I think they, from our standpoint, it was compliant. Let's see. Okay, so for the downtown links district, the permitted use is compliant. The historic preservation, we found that to be in compliance. The loading solid waste, landscaping, and screening, that was in compliance. And the landscape was in compliance. Solar exposure was in compliance, parking compliance. Alleyways and pedestrian access ways were in compliance. Okay, next. Okay, with regards to the historic zone, that's the HPZ warehouse district. We found that to be in compliance as well. So we went ahead and approved the application.
Thank you, Faye. And for the committee's information, this project did go to the Plans Review Subcommittee on March 11th, where they did recommend approval as presented, excluding the change from the garage door to a window on building 109 facade and excluding the signage, which will be reviewed later. So, Mr. Chair, I think that concludes the staff presentation. If you're open to it, I think the applicant is available to now present their design package.
Okay, ready for you, the applicant, to do project presentation.
And Richard, you're muted. If you want to share your screen, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, I have your application up as well.
Yeah, Nick, we just unmuted. So in terms of sharing our application, you just want us to walk you through the gist of it?
Yeah, go ahead and I don't know if you can see my screen, but I'm kind of in the middle of your application here. If you have something else that you'd like to present with additional materials, you're more than welcome to, but this is what was provided to the DRC ahead of today's meeting.
Right, and that's all I was going to do was pull my copy of that exact same package up. So I don't have a problem sharing your screen. We weren't exactly, I wasn't exactly prepared to make a presentation, and because I thought everybody knew what was going on, but that's okay. We can just kind of make it up as we go along. So we'll just start with the visual that you have on the screen right now, and the red dash is encircling the entire block that we're requesting for IID. There are 2 parcels here, and as you can see, the majority of it is built out entirely. Buildings occupy the exact area of these 2 parcels, with exception to a small piece on the east. That is where we're proposing our patio. And I should look to see, Nick, if there are better slides for me to talk my way through than this. So I probably should control over this. What's that?
Yeah, can we take control of it, Nick?
Absolutely. Feel free to share your screen.
Okay. So then what we should do then is we would pull up ours. And
Isn't it there on the right?
yeah, I turned all my stuff off. Thank you. Oh, it's over there. Okay. Let's move it over here so I can.
I think, yeah.
Okay, so okay, so let's see. This is a terrible version of this. It's like so small. Okay, okay. Give us just 1 second here, guys. Let me get up to speed. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen right now.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know where the share the screen button is on this.
I think is it the arrow on the right there?
Okay.
That's correct. It's the arrow in the little box there.
Got it. All right, so everybody can see our screen right now?
Yes.
Zoom in here. So that was the same image that we were just looking at right now. But I wanted to pull this slide up so that this area, we have this area highlighted in blue. So again, as I was talking about, 2 parcels and buildings entirely built out on the entire, on all the parcel, with exception of this little blue strip here. That was previously paved area that the auto repair shop used just to kind of store cars. It has ingress and egress off of 6th and 6th that we're proposing to fill those curbs in. Transportation requested that we fill this in, and we would like to turn this into a covered patio area. I guess I should back up a section and say that we have this entire area right now that we want in our IID. The work that we're doing right now is going to be limited to this area right here. And what we're proposing, and I'll kind of get into this in a little bit, is a mixed use development. We would like to put a coffee shop right here. That's why we're calling it Mata Coffee. We would like to put a barber shop right here. We would like to put an eyelash salon here. And then this will be a future restaurant that we're building the kitchen out right now, but not the rest of the restaurant. And then the idea would be that this patio area would serve these uses.
And it's focused for breakfast and lunch. Miguel from Forge Architecture also. And then what Richard Worley said was TDOT did not, there was no parking there in the blue that met any requirements, and TDOT also didn't like that the curb cuts were so near the intersection.
Let's move on here. This is kind of, these are some views of the outside of the building, so let's back up to this slide. So again, you're standing here kind of looking in this direction right here. So then what we're looking at here, again, this is the unpaved area that used to be the automobile storage that we're proposing our patio. I'm looking at this again. This area, this building here is not historic. This building here is historic. This building here, the rest of the buildings are historic. We're putting our coffee shop in here. We're proposing putting our barber shop in here, eyelash salon here, future restaurant here, and patio out here. So this piece here is the only part of it that was historic. We're keeping this intact, so we're not making any changes to it. We are making changes. You'll see as we go down the line, we're doing some facade improvements to the area that was not historic. This area here is a piece of our project that we're including it in our IID, but we're not doing any work in this part of our project. Let's go down. Again, another view of looking at it a little bit closer from the 6th Avenue side. Precedents that we thought were good precedents of things in the area that had uses that were restaurant, entertainment, tap and bottle, XO Coffee, the Royal Room. Let's see, go through here. Zoom back out a little bit. Landscape plan. We're proposing to increase trees along 6th Street here, mostly for shade. This is our covered patio. We also have trees and plantings in this area as well too. elevations of our intended design. Again, if you recall from the photographs that we just looked at, this area that we're looking at, historic building, no change, historic building, no change. This area here, we're putting a screen wall over it just to, the building was small. We didn't really think it had much street presence, trying to make it look a little bit more interesting. This view, looking at it from 6th Avenue, this is the elevation of the patio that we're talking about building here. Interior shot of the patio.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about the patios real quick, Richard. So the patio used to be a garage, and there was a mid-century modern kind of cool canopy that was over it. So we took some inference from that. Obviously, it had been ripped out and created kind of just our take on a big, pump filling canopy that created all the outdoor seating, and we wanted to create a lot of presence on the corner and a lot of visibility, even though we know we're going to have a little bit of problem with homelessness. But and we wanted to create a lot of shade because the spaces are pretty small, and these didn't have any interior seating on this side. So most of the seating is actually all exterior on the breakfast eatery and on the coffee shop.
So go back to this view here because it kind of encapsulates the whole project. Again, the historic piece that we're keeping intact, and that will be the barber shop. This is the area that you were previously looking at. That is our coffee shop, and you kind of wrap around the corner. So this is 6th Street, and this is 6th Avenue over here, and the kind of covered patio that we're proposing to serve the coffee shop and the breakfast restaurant. Again, some enlargements of kind of the feeling that we would like to have on the patio. We're proposing mural down on this end, trees covering. Again, this is mostly to serve for seating because the spaces were so small for the coffee shop and the restaurant that we needed this area for seating. This is the view kind of the streetscape that we're proposing. Again, we believe that this project would enhance the street, with the trees, the kind of just improve the urban area in terms of having people out here, congregating. We thought it would be a nice addition to the neighborhood. The very end of the proposal, again, was jumping back to the historic that I already had alluded to. Everything in red is historic, and everything in blue is not. And again, this is our patio. So again, proposing, this is the area that we would be doing the work to the facade improvements. This area we would not.
And those are the areas, the ones in blue, including the one immediately adjacent that they have tenants for. They are all actually their own tenants for all these spaces. The owners are, so they're gonna, they're gonna be occupying all of them, but they haven't secured the tenants for the ones to the west.
So I think that's about it. Nick, I'm gonna back out to this this slide. Would you like me to give control back to you?
You can stay controlling the screen because I think the DRC is probably going to have some questions for you, so it might be easier for you to navigate.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I think that concludes the applicant's presentation. Did you want to turn it over to the DRC for discussion?
I do. And please unmute if you have a question, and mute when you're finished with your question.
Now that I'm sharing the screen.
I just had a question about when you talked about the historic structures on the notes on the meeting staff recommendations. It looked like the Historic Commission had referenced the garage door. Is that in this image where you're replacing the roll down steel garage door with this more translucent type? I'm trying to understand what they referred that they did not approve, that they wanted you to keep in place. Is it that space?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Yeah, that's exactly correct. What happened was, this is our design concept image that ultimately, as we we improve this block. So we're not doing any work in this building right now, but the idea would be that if this sort of retail restaurant, use were to expand, which we're asking for in this IID to ultimately be able to move into this, that when we did work on this, we would take that garage door and turn it into some kind of a glass system. But we're not doing, and so it was a little misleading that the rendering shows this as being work, but we're really not working in this area. So that was exactly correct.
I understand. And so they were all right with the idea of replacing that kind of metal rolling thing with something like this, and that wasn't an issue in the future when you do that work.
That's exactly what they would like us, and we would have to run it through historic again so that they could see exactly what we were doing. At this point, we're not sure of the scope, and so they were exactly, we would have to do it again.
Yeah, Robin, Miguel here. Yeah, so it was odd, but it was fine, but they just wanted to see more options on that.
Okay. Noted. Thank you. It was just a little unclear what they'd seen and what we were seeing. So, but I understand and I take no exception. Thank you.
Other questions?
This is Bill. I have a couple questions.
Okay.
The south facade of the building along the coffee shop, what's that to be made of?
That material is called thermery, and it's a wood that comes from Austria, and it's oven baked. So it's a special material that we can use. We just used it in a house in Rocky Point. And we're using it in a couple other projects that's especially made basically be in extremely hot arid climates.
And what's the overall square footage of of all the buildings on the site?
Gosh, I don't have that up. I think it's about 9,000 square feet of all the buildings. It's definitely in here somewhere. So let's see. Development package.
While you're doing that, Nick or Faye, do you know if is there parking on the street on 6th Street or 6th Avenue? Is there metered parking?
No, there's not.
This is Miguel. There's a lot of parking because we did an individual park. There's a lot of parking basically up and down 6th Avenue on both sides of the street. There's no parking on 6th Street, but there is on 6th Avenue, both north and south of our intersection.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I could have a calculator, it's 5,000, 7,000, 6,000.
It's 4,800 plus 5,500, so it's a little over 10,000.
Yeah, so I was about to say, yeah, it's a little under 11,000, so yeah, it's a little over 10,000.
On the 12,193 square lot, but yeah.
And my last question is, just in these urban areas, is there, are they exempt from any parking requirement? Nick, do you know that?
Yeah, so Bill, the requirement in the Downtown Links sub-district is 0 parking requirements for commercial uses.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
Other questions?
I have some.
Okay.
Conceptually, I don't have a problem with the change of use or your floor plans or the garden or what you're doing to the non-contributing structure. I am a little surprised not to see plans for the steel deck on here or materials or any of that sort of stuff. Looking at the perspectives, it's showing basically some version of a chain link fence, which I assume is for liquor control. Could you explain what your intentions there? Because there's really no materials palette or anything else for this project.
So the idea there was, it's not the chain link, but the idea there was to use some kind of method to control for security. So we were actually looking at the wire mesh that they use on the parking structures, not a chain link. We wouldn't put chain link in there, but it's a very thin kind of wire mesh I didn't pull it up on the screen, but it's commonly used as kind of a wire netting for parking structures.
This comment came up during the historic review because they also didn't like the look of this and the confusion that it was a chain link, and we reiterated that it was not going to be a chain link fence. That it's a little misleading in the rendering.
That's fine. It's just, is there a particular reason you didn't put samples or a palette or materials or anything in a presentation for us to kind of have a concept? Otherwise, I guess it's just left up to staff and permitting and your personal wishes.
No, we thought the renderings did a pretty good job of showing the design intent, and that's exactly what's in the permitting process right now. But we can provide an additional version of that screen. I mean, the idea was just from the 3 foot to about the 5'6" level.
Okay. And then I'm looking at your landscaping plans, and those 4 trees and the slipper plants are all in boxes, correct? They're on the east side of the property?
Yes, because of the limitation.
All right. And then it shows some street trees going in. A few of them are actually specified on the landscaping plan, but some of them are not. Have you had talks with TDOT? What's the applicability? It looks kind of like some of those planter boxes that you're proposing, or where your current water meters are, and so on and so forth. So what are the actual plans for the trees along that on the 6th Street frontage?
Well, right now, we're dealing with Ryan and somebody else at TDOT on the landscaping, but the idea was to use the mesquites until they tell us to change it around the whole property.
Okay. On your initial application, it showed that you were providing 2 long-term bicycle spaces, even though no parking, but that's not showing up here. Are you providing any racks for pedestrians who bike in, maybe in the north part of the courtyard, near the art wall, or for staff or anything like that? Or are they all expected to walk in and leave their bikes elsewhere?
Well, so this project is actually concurrently in building review right now. And of course, we would have to meet, those standards based on the building review. So the answer is yes. And right now, the plans that are submitted, currently being reviewed, have bike parking in this area right here. Long-term and short-term is in this area. And then ultimately, what was submitted was the first round of the development plan in order to generate comments for this IID. The second development revision is happening, going in right now, and it also, of course, has to meet city standards for bike parking, and it also is showing the bike parking in this area as well.
So you're committed to put in short-term racks for your clientele in that area, but not a specific number yet until staff tells you how many?
Well, we know how many, and I don't recall them off the top of my head, but we're required to meet a land use code standard, and for long-term and short-term, and whatever that number was what we submitted in our plans. And I don't really recall it off the top of my head. It was not a lot. I think it might have been like 2 short-term, 2 long-term, something like that.
So Richard, this is Nick. I'm looking at your development package right now, and you're providing 6 short-term, and it looks like 1 long-term space.
Okay.
Okay, well, I hope that's enough. And if you can increase it, you'll probably get more bike in traffic for your patio. It took me a little while to try to figure out what plans review was talking about with the building 109, and that's the area you're not talking about, which is the 1930 brick building. So I assume that will come back both to them and us for review if you plan on changing it. Possibly not.
Yeah, that was the question I'd asked John.
Yeah, and I was
question.
unclear on the signage. Was it the signage on the historic, contributing historic portions of the building, or was it all signage from PRS? That's not what I'm not clear on.
I believe they were mostly geared towards the historic, but I believe it was all signage. We were showing, again, signage from a conceptual point of view. in the renderings that we were looking at earlier, and they just wanted to make sure that what we were depicting here as signage was not, that they were not approving that we would have to come back and have a signage review, that what we were showing here was not going to be what was there. And again, this signage is just conceptual. We don't know what the signage is really going to be. So the answer is yes, no signage on any of the project.
Okay.
Well, my understanding was that the signage on the historic buildings definitely have to go through the historic. But obviously all the signage on this building facing east, I didn't know if they specified that, Nick, in that historic review meeting, but we would have to go through signage review also with the city as a separate package.
I'm happy to leave it to that, but I think it ought to be one of the conditions that all signage is reviewed by historic for compatibility for the area. But it led me to further questions, because we're talking about existing buildings with all the windows as they are and all the other stuff. And then I started to look, and there hasn't been a permit pulled on this property since 2004. And I guess the current owner purchased it in 2014. And yet magically all these changes have happened. For instance, the non-contributing building has been stuccoed that you're now popping windows in. And the placement of the doors and windows on the east side have changed. And magically, from a stuccoed up front, the barber shop now has a gridded frame window that is listed as contributing, but on your farther down in your package, it's showing the historic property card that shows it's a Spanish colonial building that actually had a tile roof, and Google Street Views show that that was removed in about 2014, somewhere between 2013 and 2015. So I'm a little surprised that contributing properties in a city historic district have never been reviewed for all the already existing changes to the historic properties. The tile roof was taken off. Your new facade suggests that you're taking off the parapet on the barbershop building on the east end, and I don't quite know why. And so I don't want to just magically approve this project saying that that's existing, so everything that's happened to date actually meets all standards, because for instance, the barbershop building now has lost every character defining element to it. So I kind of have a problem with that.
Well, let me jump in. First of all, the barber, we have not eliminated the existing parapet. We actually haven't done anything. I think what you're talking about is the wing wall that faces maybe east. I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
Yes, the eastern parapet wall that you just see in profile from 6th Street, but you can see it as a full-on parapet from 6th Avenue.
Right.
And your facade no longer shows that, and the tile roof that was the contributing defining feature was removed without a permit within the last 7 years, and it's not being proposed to be there. So theoretically, I'm not sure it's a contributing building anymore, because it's lost all of its contributing status unless you're proposing putting a tile replacement roof on that particular facade again.
Well, we're not aware, first of all, that our client removed that. We took over the project with the facades as they are now. And we did step in and show all the photos to historic. That comment did not come up with historic. And I was not aware of the fact that we would have to verify that and verify your photos. Not saying that that's not right, but we were not aware of any of that happening with this client and them ripping it out or having removed it.
Yeah, I appreciate your standing, and you've come in fairly recently, and you had an existing building, and I think you did a great job adapting it. And I really don't have a problem with your whole concept or the plans that we're approving today, but I don't want to like backdate an approval for what was pretty much an egregious, unreviewed, substantial change to a contributing historic structure that should be commented on before it just keeps moving forward. And you can see the tile roof if you scroll down to the bottom of your package and look at 139 East 6th Street, and it does indeed show those tiles. And then if you look at the timeline on a Google Streetscape, you can see exactly when it disappeared.
Yeah, I'm just not sure when. That photo doesn't necessarily mean, I know you said you checked it back in 2014, but I don't know that that photo is actually, sometimes they reach back to older photos of the properties. When they're doing the assessment, I know for contributing versus non-contributing.
It's an ancient photo, it's black and white right here.
That photo is not recent.
No,
even from 2014.
It's from 1995, but that tile roof was there as of 2013, and it was not there as of 2015, and that's really the only thing that was on the facade that made it Spanish colonial. You kind of see
This is Nick.
Yeah.
We do have Jody Brown, our historic preservation officer, on the call today. Jody, are you available to comment on the significance of that tile roof and just what that means for this project?
Sure. I'm not aware of the building being delisted by SHPO. It is a contributing resource to a National Register district. And so it speaks to the whole. It's not like an individually listed property where integrity would have to be pretty pristine or pretty high up there. I don't think that the removal of the tile roof, it's not a good thing for sure, because it definitely gave it a nod to the Spanish colonial style, but it wasn't something that I would categorize 100% as a Spanish colonial. And I don't think removal of the tile would necessarily delist the building. It is something that was probably removed. I mean, it was probably just a little shed roof that was up there. It was a decorative feature. It wasn't a full tile roof. And likely they didn't get a permit for it because I didn't see anything for it, but I don't know that they would have had to get a permit for it. They weren't doing any other work associated with it. It's a minor modification. So I don't even know that that would have triggered a permit.
Okay, fair enough. It's
not ideal. I mean, it's a historic fabric that was removed.
Yeah.
And I see where you're mentioning the renderings that they have showing the parapet on the east facade of that building raising up, and it looks like that's either being eliminated or I don't know what's going on with that, but that should be maintained.
So we can chime in, so again, this is a conceptual rendering, and in the building plans that we have submitted, there's no work happening to this facade at all. This little area here that looks like we extended a parapet, we did not. There, again, this is
not the piece that goes above it.
Yeah, this piece above it up here, that is not in the plans that we submitted to the city. We said we were not doing any work to that facade, and we're not. It's going to look just like this, exactly like this, with no signage, no nothing. We're working inside
on that parapet.
And we're not
about that parapet. Yeah.
This parapet here?
Yeah.
No, we're not ripping that down. We're not doing anything to this building.
Yeah, it's just in the rendering, the little tab is not shown.
Yeah, the rendering makes it look like we're tearing this down or else we're filling this in, but we are not.
okay. Are all the windows that are there now steel or aluminum or?
Steel.
They're all steel.
It's a steel storefront system. The doors too.
Okay. All along the east and the replacement windows there in the barber shop.
Yeah, all these windows are the same. They were custom windows made out of steel.
Okay. And it looks like you're going to close up some of the driveways on the curbs. Are you planning on closing all of them, or closing up all of them, or the two to the far west are actually some of the old 1938 concrete and have scoring patterns to them, so they're like what's left of the streetscape. I'm not sure it will matter because that's going to be a major corridor pretty soon, but then I'm sure TDOT has something to say about all of that. But
TDOT asked us to close those up because they don't want people, the ingress and egress are too close to the curb and to all of these facilities. So they asked us as a condition to close these up.
okay. Can you at least record the historic ones before you close them up? And if there are any markings, you might save those particular stamps. That's usually what's done in historic districts with defining features. I don't know if there are any stamps that say, 6th Avenue or an address or anything else, but if there's any of that in there, that's
Yeah, I think that can be accommodated.
okay. All right. And then walk me through the trash thing. It's after closing, all the trash goes in a dumpster that will be in the courtyard and go out on the sidewalk and be rolled 184 feet down the sidewalk and around the building to a dumpster every day?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think that will be sufficient if you do expand all of that area eventually to food service, or will you have to make other accommodations as you expand further west?
Well, I can answer some of that, I believe, just based on our experience, having done, over 20 restaurants in the downtown area. So we start with that kind of the idea that it is all, rolled out daily and put out there because they've been, in our projects in the downtown, we've had almost, I think, every other day pickup for trash. In order to accommodate those and the ones that we've done down 4th Avenue. We're not in a vicinity right now where we have a compactor, which is obviously in the future will alleviate this. But we have a plan also with the owners because they do also own the Tucson Blue building, which has additional trash. So we would probably accommodate or be able to expand the trash storage based on usage.
Okay. But you think it's certainly sufficient for what you're proposing currently?
Yeah, because the coffee house is, as you saw, it's pretty small. There's no seating in the coffee house. And also the existing future breakfast place, which will be only morning and lunch, breakfast and lunch, obviously, that, based on our experience and our analysis, we're okay right now.
Okay.
But the owners have talked about adding, if they need to, down on Tucson Blue.
Okay. And what do you think that the full maximum occupancy of the site will be? Just
for people?
Yeah. No, pets.
No, I meant occupancy as far as I didn't know if you meant who's going to go in there, as in, because we don't know really what's going to go in the left and the right. But obviously, we would be at a plus 250 occupancy for interior seating and exterior seating if they were to do those functions to the west, which there is no guarantee of that either.
But in the current area, it's probably more like no more than 75 on site.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we're pretty tight. We're showing more seating there than I think we're even going to get for.
Okay.
Because most of that where you see dining right there, that's actually turning in, because that most of that project right there is going to be all kitchen because of the what you're seeing right now. The build out on your plan is just the back of house dishwash. So there's still the cook line, storage, refrigeration, and all that, which pretty much takes up that whole footprint.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for my questions. As I said, I don't have a problem with the concept you're presenting today. It was just some of the background issues that I did.
Got it.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
This is Eric. I have a few questions, but Jody's had her hand up for a while. You want to say something, Jody,
About
first?
the 6th Street, they're mesquite trees, and to the neighborhoods in the Northwest University has had a pretty challenging with the mesquite trees breaking up sidewalks and curbs and uplifting pavement. And so how are these trees being planted to prevent that from happening?
Well, right now we were hoping for the standard 4x4. TDOT said they might have an issue with those three to the west, and we might have to pick a smaller tree that are in the that are in a raised planter. No, the ones to the west, those are the last three. That they might have a problem with those being in the ground with all the utilities that they have there, and they might make us do a box tree that's I'm sorry, it's gonna have to be raised and different.
Okay.
Can you expand that some more? I guess the question is, I understand utility conflicts and issues with that. Can you also explain, so is this going to be like a 5-year plan and you're going to change trees out every 5 years, or what's that look like? Because trees and boxes don't last long.
Well, it depends what tree it is too, right? Is that you, Eric? Sorry, didn't tell.
Yes, it is. It's me, Eric, yes.
Hey, Eric, sorry, we can't tell on our screen right now because of our share screen. Well, Eric, we were going to let Norris, who's our landscape architect, do the final selection if it has to change and we can't go in the ground. But sure. They were talking about trees that could survive in a box, but wouldn't be a mesquite.
Yeah, I'm not going to, yeah, I don't mind a Norris. They can pick out the tree. That's all fine. I don't have any problems with that. It's just more of, again, it's like a fish in a fishbowl. It's only going to live for so long, and at some point it's going to, expand the box. So if we're looking at trying to provide improvements with the assistance of IID process, what's the long-term plan? Are they going to get changed out every year? How is this going to be maintained long-term? Because I would say the way that I look at Tucson in our aspects of tree replacements and everything else, they don't get replaced. They get cut down and they're never put back.
Well, as we would understand it, we can put it as a condition in the approval is the owner would be responsible for replacing the trees if obviously if TDOT's system does not replace it. I don't think they'd have a problem that they'd be in charge of it. I think our goal would still be to put them in the ground. We just haven't been given the okay on those last three.
Okay. Yeah, if you could get them, that would be preferred. Second, the size doesn't meet standards, so 4x4 is not large enough for meeting the current standards. So you have to work through all that as well. I mean, it really has to be a 6x6 planter to meet your tree requirement for space available. So there's a lot that still needs to be worked out through that. And my apology for replanting the street. I guess that's my initial position. Street trees are a good thing for our community.
Yeah, this is all pretty old. There's nothing along that whole sidewalk westward.
Correct. My only other question is, have you? I know it's an older area of town. It also has some creates some downstream flooding issues. Is there any way you guys are looking to do water harvesting or anything on the project?
I did, water harvesting. Yes, we were doing water harvesting, and
we had not incorporated that.
Yeah, we have not incorporated. That yet. That, Eric. It's possible we could do something over here. If we're working when capturing some of the water off the roofs over here, but we haven't looked at that, mostly because of the existing, concrete paving conditions that we have here.
I have no further questions.
One more question about parking. You have a residential neighborhood to the north of you, which most people don't have garages. They park on the street, and often 6th Avenue can be quite full during the daytime and early evening. So what plans do you have to help if it becomes an issue for the neighborhood in terms of the actual neighbors finding a place to park, which again, they're required to park on the street for the most part, to help alleviate pressure from your business on those sites, those parking spaces?
Well, one of the reasons for this project is we're, obviously that's an ideal situation. It doesn't work perfectly with Tucsonans, but the idea is to push urban transit because the idea that we are within 2 blocks of the streetcar, we are down a pretty urban corridor now. If you look at 6th Avenue, especially 6th Avenue from the from the south of from the north of the underpass where Leafs is going to kind of is in process of ripping up the whole thing. But we have one major parking lot right at 7th Street and 5th Avenue that's on the northwest corner. And we also know that 170 spaces are currently being put in at the corner of 7th and 6th Avenue. Now that one, we don't know how they're going to designate the parking, but the other ones are available for public parking.
Okay. So I guess my question is still that it's nice that I use public transportation as well, but a lot of people just want to drive and be close to something. And while there are some spaces next to Mitchell Car Wash and Church on that side of this street, on 5th Street, it's just, I want to have some assurances that if it starts to become an issue for neighbors finding a place to park, which is the only place they have the parking on the street, that you'll work with the neighborhood association to find resolution to that, if that becomes an issue.
Well, also the neighborhood that you're referring to, which is basically, you know, a block north. It starts right at there, and then which is only about a block farther than the parking lot that we're referring to at 7th and at 7th and 5th Avenue. So proximity-wise,
Okay.
when you look at that neighborhood to the north and you look at the parking that's available to the south, it's pretty similar. Now, obviously, that involves retraining, you know, your clientele and retraining everyone. But the whole idea behind this is to encourage people parking and walking, and not, you know, parking to the far north neighborhood of Woonut.
Okay. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I have a question about procedurally. Nick, can we, for instance, if we want to make sure that there's a little bit of oversight so it doesn't look like a chain link fence, can we direct that be approved by the design professional?
I have a feeling you did.
The specific material, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so that it's compatible with the character of the overall design and not just a chain link fence.
Yes, we can have the design professional review the screen material as part of their building package submittal.
Okay, and everything basically for 131, 135, and 137 will have to come back to both us and plans review? Or do
Any exterior, you're referring to the historic buildings to the west of what they're proposing?
Yes.
Yes, so any exterior work that is going to occur on those buildings will need to go back to PRS and the DRC for your approval.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion for approval with conditions?
I could try one. Okay, in the matter of IID 20-03 Matta Coffee, we recommend approval as presented with the following conditions. The screening material of the courtyard is approved by the design professional. Any further action on 131, 135, and 137, future expansion, needs to come back to both PRS and us. And we encourage the owners to consider restoring non-permitted removal of historic details on the other contributing structure known as 139 West 6th.
And Eric, do you have any additions about the trees on 6th Street?
No, I don't. I mean, they need to follow code compliance, and current plan does not reflect that. So if they bring in Norris to take care of that, they should address it just fine.
We can say that the trees, any trees approved by TDOT and the staff should be viable. You want that as a condition?
With my grandfather.
I don't have it. Again, I got to meet certain requirements for DRB, not DRB, TDOT, and just staff approval. So right now they're not in compliance with the current plan shown. It needs to be compliant once they submit and get formal approval.
Okay.
There's no conditions that we need to put on it that
say the landscaping needs to be code compliant.
Correct, but that should be required. That's a requirement regardless of what we say or not.
Okay.
That's
Okay. I'll take a vote on John's.
We have a second.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
Good luck with it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the project on.
We like the hard ones. With no budget. All right, thanks, guys.
Are we ready to start the next one, Nick?
Yes, Mr. Chair, ready to move on to item 4.
Thanks, everyone, for your time.
IID-19-09, 75 East Broadway, DP 21-0057. This is a courtesy review only. There's no action. Floor is open for the presenters.
Great, thank you. This is Michael Becker with Swam Associates. Appreciate your time today. I'll try to be brief as I can. This is a big project, so there's a lot to cover. Our intent in coming in today, obviously, is to get some feedback. This is going to be a large addition to downtown. It is an 18-story building, and it will have a significant impact on both the streetscape and the skyline. So we want to get some feedback before we come back. Obviously, we didn't want to pull it. We didn't want to come and talk to you for the first time trying to pull a permit. So we want to get this in front of you and get your initial ideas and really kind of find out what the hot button issues are. So when we come back for a formal review, we'll have a good roadmap in terms of what we need to address. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There you go. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is 75 East Broadway. It is the vacant lot behind the Chicago Music Store. This is a photograph from 6th and Broadway looking northwest. There's the old Chicago store there with the rest of the back of the existing retail and historic buildings on Congress down to the old Wigorama on the corner. So this in the foreground essentially is our project site, this entire half of the block. And then in this photograph, you can see the other 3 high-rise buildings in downtown. And just as a point of reference, and I have a drawing later that shows this, in terms of height, One South Church is 330 feet tall, which I'm not sure how they got an extra 30 feet because the zoning is 300 feet. The Bank of America building is about 260 feet, and the Pima County Legal Services building is in that same range at about 260 feet. So our building is going to be 240 feet, so certainly at this, not quite as tall, but at this same scale that you're seeing in this photograph. This is just the Google Street View or Google Map of the area. Again, I just want to make sure everybody's oriented. So we've got Congress going through the upper side. We've got Broadway on the south side, and then we're bound by 6th Avenue on the east and Scott Avenue on the west. So this dirt lot right here is our site, and we are filling the entire site. There's also an existing alley that separates our site from the buildings to the north, and as we'll show you, we're incorporating that alley into the design to provide some more pedestrian connectivity. So let me switch now to the actual presentation. So we're going to zoom in a little bit more to the actual site plan. The building plan in this site drawing is a little out of date, so that's why I drew this red line here. We've straightened out the ramps. I'll explain that in just a second. But fundamentally what we're doing, you can see the buildings on the north side, which sort of follow this kind of configuration. Those are all existing to remain, and we're not doing any work on those as part of this project. So this project is focusing on the south side of the site. The other thing you can see in this photograph is we do have a column line that runs basically along the existing alley easement. So we are working to acquire the alley from the city of Tucson and be able to basically cover that alley, restrict the access for only fire and after hours deliveries, and then keep that mostly a open pedestrian area to create this kind of permeability through the site. And then we have some other modifications to the buildings to the north that will basically enhance that pedestrian connectivity. I'll show you in just a second. One thing I do want to point out is our development team that is acquiring this property also currently owns the entire north half of the block as well. So they're really looking at this as the retail revitalization of the entire block, and all of this kind of working together to achieve that. From a streetscape perspective, this shows just sort of graphically the material palette that we're looking at. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of some of these red lines. So through the kind of the new alley itself, it'll be fairly open because we do need that for fire access, but we do have space kind of here between the new columns and the existing buildings where we're going to be able to have some exterior amenities that will get developed over time. On all three streetscapes, so on Scott Avenue, on Broadway, and on 6th, we are adding some landscape elements, including street trees and some planting beds, some raised steel planters in a couple of areas, in addition to some short-term bike parking in all of those locations as well. Our primary entrance to the upper floors of the building is going to be in the center of the Broadway elevation, but then we also have 2 entries into the first floor retail at the east and west corners of the building that are recessed and covered. I think quickly just to talk about I'm sorry, let's go to the next slide. So from the streetscape perspective, we're really looking at the adjacent recent developments, so the Scott Avenue improvements, the TEP building, and drawing from those same palettes to create our streetscape. So we'll have the metal planters, we'll have some different integral colored pavers, the tree grades, all the site furniture and other amenities. We're even in that pedestrian alley, we're looking at creating some kind of either dynamic or interactive opportunities with some projection and things at night. But the real intent for this, particularly for this, what we're calling the pedestrian corridor, is to really make that a pedestrian friendly, well lit, comfortable space that you can move through. So what we want to have happen is we have some of our new retail has frontage on the alley, and then of course all of the existing buildings to the north will have frontage to the alley. So we're really seeing this as another set of entrances, into these buildings from this new pedestrian corridor that we're creating on the ground floor. This is the landscape plan. Again, just the actual technical drawing. This has the correct background though for the building itself. I'll talk a little more detail about how it's organized when you get to the architectural drawing. I did want to show this drawing. This is a little bit earlier and more of a concept plan, but you can see that again, that urban pedestrian corridor cutting through east to west. Our building lobby cuts all the way through into that, so we have doors on the north and the south side of our elevator lobby. And then the intent is to take the middle building of the north block and create a pedestrian access through here. So maybe we develop some small retail spaces in this corner, but really we want to see this kind of cruciform permeability throughout the site when this is complete. This center building, it is a historic building, but I will say it's also had significant modifications to the Congress facade. This was Rob Hollis's office for a while. So we believe we can make some further modifications to make this pedestrian access work. And obviously we'll work with the Historic Commission as well on this. For purposes of what we're doing right now, though, we're not doing any work to this north side of the block. We're really only proposing and submitting the new building itself. This is the first floor plan. Again, this is the pedestrian alley. We are entering the building off of Scott Avenue with a parking deck. So there's basically an inbound ramp and an outbound ramp coming in and off Scott Avenue. We are addressing the stacking concern about cars getting into the garage, and I'll show that in just a moment. But before we leave this drawing, I do want to show, we have a significant amount of the lower level of this building that is essentially service, and we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible, because obviously we want as much open space as we can get around that new pedestrian corridor. But we have our transformers. We will have trash compactors with rollout dumpsters that would be picked up, similar to how we've handled trash at the AC Marriott. And then other service items that we have to have on the first floor, like the generator, the water service, fire pumps. We're accommodating all that, but even with all that, we're still able to have about a 9,000 square foot retail space on the east and about a 3,600 square foot retail space on the west. There are no tenants identified yet. We've been trying to maintain this larger retail space, because when you start to look at some of the larger national retailers, such as some of the drugstores, or they want to see these larger footprints. So we want to create a flexible space that's going to get that next level of retail in downtown. That's not just bars and restaurants, but is really service retail. That's the intent. We move up through the building. This is the second floor, which is the first parking deck. So you're coming up the garage on this ramp, you would loop around, and then our parking control doesn't happen until you get up here. So we essentially have the entire length of the building on the parking ramp coming around to this first parking control to be able to provide the stacking, so we don't back up on Scott when people are, basically when you have rush hour in the morning. Within the parking decks, we're also providing some long-term bicycle parking and some other storage areas for the building on different levels of the parking deck. This drawing is just our typical parking deck. We will have 500 parking stalls on site. Although under the IID, we are asking for a reduction, because we would be required to have close to 800 stalls under the existing land use code. And we will be doing an individual parking plan to show that. This is simply the 9th floor or 8th floor parking deck, the final deck. This drawing shows the office floor plate, and this is really why we think this project is important for downtown. This is a 30,000 square foot floor plate with just the core in the center. So we really have some big, wide open office spaces that will be available for some, any of the kind of, new commercial office users that we're looking to bring into the city. It's a market in downtown that's pretty thin right now. You just don't get these kind of floor plates. So they're an important aspect of the project. Something that was added recently by our development team, we've now added floors of residential. So there'll be 33 units per floor. 4 floors will have 130 units within the building. There'll be 4 2-bedroom units per floor, and then the rest will be a series of 1-bedrooms and studios. The 2-bedroom units also get some balconies on the corners, and I'll show those in the elevations in just a minute. Again, just to add another architecture feature to the facade of the building. Another added component to this project is we have a 18th floor amenity deck now. So at the 18th floor on the west end, this would be our mechanical space. On the north side of this, we're providing a space for a restaurant and a restaurant terrace. Then we have a small conference center with another event terrace on the east end. We have a community room and residential terrace for the residential users. We have a fitness room and then an office terrace, so the office users have an exterior space. We don't have any terraces or patios on the office floors. Let's see. So this is the elevations as we just sent them, the ones that you have. I want to walk through just a little bit of the design evolution for this project to kind of explain how we got here. And then we've actually had some revisions since this. And Nick, after the meeting, I'll send you this PowerPoint so you can have it for the record of everything that we're showing today. But this is our, basically this is the south, the Broadway and the 6th Avenue facades. Previously, we had 2 floors of retail. As we worked through the design and the cost estimating and the pro forma, that's now been reduced to 1 floor of retail, which you can see there. Above that, we have the 6 parking decks. We have 5 floors of office, the 4 floors of retail. and the roof amenities. We were looking at trying to introduce some color and some other, features to the facade of the building. And this has changed over time. I'll show you how we got here, and then we've taken another step from here that I think is moving in a positive direction. This is the north facade and the west facade. We've always looked at the west facade, trying to make it a little more opaque than the east or the south. That's kind of what you're seeing in that elevation. From a material standpoint, just briefly, anything on the ground floor is going to be concrete or masonry or glass, because we want the durability. When we get up to the upper floors, this gray material and the green material would be some kind of a metal composite aluminum panel. And then at the office floors, this would be storefront glazing with opaque spandrel panels in this. A couple challenges with this design: we're currently showing too much glass. Some of you may be aware, under the current building code, you have to limit your transparent glazing to 40% or less of your building envelope. So our newer concept is accommodating that reduction in glazing, but some of the features we try to keep are things like the full glass corner offices and other things. To take you back in time just a little bit to show how this project's changed. There we go. This is where we were about a year and a half ago with the building design. So at the time, it was a 12-story building. It was 5 floors of office, 5 floors of parking, and then the 2 floors of retail at the bottom, and really trying to create a rhythm on the streetscape that would mimic, to a certain degree, some of the historic patterns of larger storefront openings at the first floor with some smaller punched openings at the second floor. Kind of like the Julian Drew building has that pattern, the Chicago store has that pattern on the Congress side. So really trying to maintain that rhythm, but in a contemporary way for this building. Again, like I said, this was about a year and a half ago, and then we got a call from the developer saying they wanted to expand the project. So we went from, 12 stories to now 18 stories. And that's when we added the residential components, and really we needed to reconsider the design. We didn't want to just sort of stretch this current design to 18 stories. It didn't feel right and really wasn't doing, I think, justice for the project. So went back to some early concept sketches. This was kind of oops, lost it. There we go. This was just kind of a sketch that I did, trying to think about how to start to organize the facade of the building, with this idea of these kind of 2 folded plates, one from the from the west elevation coming up and creating a roof, and then some kind of a folded surface that would create that garage screening. And then, obviously the glazing and the occupied spaces in between. So we took that concept and went through a whole lot of different variations of that, looking at where we would have, for instance, this scheme has the office floors in the center, residential floors above it, thinking about how we can detail those so that it becomes a little more obvious what the uses are. We flipped that in this scheme. So we ran through a lot of different design scenarios, thinking about this concept and trying to find, different variations on that might work. What we landed on initially was this concept. The residential levels are on the upper part of the building here. The office levels below that have more of a continuous glazing because of the use of that space. And then the brown area is the garage screen. We still don't know exactly what this is. It's some kind of perforated screen. I've always thought about it as kind of an old penny sort of color to it. And then at the ground floor, we still have the 2 floors of retail, and that's subsequently gone down to 1. You'll see a drawing in a second that shows that. Again, this would be, the gray materials would be some kind of composite aluminum panels with storefront glazing and some spandrel glazing. With the residential levels in this scheme, we actually had balconies for every residential unit. So these were sort of boxes that would extend from the building and have those balconies outside of the main floor plate. And then we created this kind of color scheme to show the different units. So for instance, this yellow area, actually, that is the unit. It spans that divider between the 2. So we're trying to develop this sort of language that talks about the internal workings of the building. And then we have the upper floor, 18th floor amenity deck with primarily, again, the mechanical on the west end, open terrace space on the east end, and then some of the actual uses in between. We got another round of financial information and realized we could not, in fact, afford all of the balconies. So in this scheme, we have reduced the balcony numbers. There are no balconies on the north or south facades, and they are in the corners on the east and west. So this green projection, which is this piece, then has 4 balconies for those 4 corner units. We kept maintaining the color scheme, but eventually we kind of moved away from this, and we'll see in just a second. And this was before we made the change at the first floor. I believe this is the scheme that we sent to you, and we're starting to show the screening as a vertical panel with some space between that creates that kind of texture and rhythm. The first floor in this is a little more contemporary, thinking of larger panes of glass with some folded pieces, potentially concrete, that would create canopies at the street level. And then also trying to create some feature pieces to really mark the entrances to the building as a kind of visual wayfinding in the city. We're also in these drawings now showing the Chicago Music Store in relationship to the east facade, and in the next drawing, there we go. This is the old Wigorama building here, and you get a clear sense of scale. This is a large building adjacent to some fairly low-rise buildings, but I'll show you the new design, how that's kind of being managed. So these next 2 slides are actually the current, where we are currently. What we've been concerned about, and I'd like some feedback actually from the committee, is this layer cake feeling we keep getting. You know, as this, you know, it's the nature, the uses of the building that we have these stacked uses, but it hasn't quite felt right in the design in terms of how the building starts to feel like one building and is a unified composition rather than these 3 things, you know, like a wedding cake. So in this last scheme, the blue parts are basically the green parts. We're still working on the color palette. And the idea is that these are more like ribbons that sort of fold in and around the building. So this creates the roof, comes down the side. This is those balconies again, which is basically this same area here. And then that same blue material continues down and then creates enclosures at the corner of the garage where we have some storage units. On the south facade, we're doing something similar, you know, where we have the balcony extensions here. That same material folds, comes down the center, folds out, and creates the main entry canopy for the building on the south facade. When you look at how we're starting to look at the historic buildings, you know, we're trying to pull lines. So we have the cornice line of this building that comes through and sort of informs where we cut the screen off. This darker surface is also recessed from this surface in the parking garage. So we've created a void between the existing building and our new building. The streetscape, so this area is in the same plane as the old Wigorama, but you have some relief between the 2 buildings with the alley entrance here and then the parking garage entrance here. The ground floor retail is simplified, but still has the larger glazing. It's 22 feet now tall for 1 floor of retail, so it'll be a much larger scale space, which we think is going to feel better, but it also gives us an opportunity to introduce another datum line at that lower scale that creates some shade structures within the facade itself. I'll point out also all of the office and residential levels have sunshades over the windows to kind of cut down on the solar heat gain. This is what I mentioned earlier. I drew these 3 lines. So this 330 feet, that represents 1 South Church. The 260 represents the Bank of America building and the Legal Services building. And then the 272, just as another point of reference, is the Tucson House. So just to give you a better sense of scale, that this is a large building. And again, it's kind of an impact on the overall skyline of the city. This is the east facade, 6th Street facade. Again, there's the Chicago Music Store, picking up the datum of that cornice again to establish, you know, where we stop those blue panels and then have the open space for the pedestrian alley that goes between the 2 buildings, and then creating that streetscape rhythm. And then again, reintroducing those punched openings at the 2nd floor parking deck as a way, it's openings in the perforated screen, but I think it still helps to express that geometry that we're talking about between solid and void, first floor and second floor. So this final drawing, this is the actual north facade. So you're cutting through, looking into that pedestrian alley. This is our ramp coming up to the first parking deck, and we have more design work to do in this entire area because we really want that to be a comfortable pedestrian environment, and having a parking ramp in there with cars flying up and down it, we need to create some more screening in there to make sure that that pedestrian experience is the best that it can be. So that's the quick walkthrough of what we're proposing. Like I said, we're sort of mid-stride in this new redesign, so I feel like, you know, coming here today and getting some feedback from the committee based on sort of the high profile of this project was important, so that we can take your suggestions and as we complete this redesign, and then come back to you in, you know, probably a month or so with a revised design to get some more feedback on. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. And yeah, see what the committee thinks.
Thank you. Any questions?
This is Robin. Can you hear me? I'm having a little technical difficulties. I'm afraid my video is not working, but can you hear me all right?
I hear you.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Michael, thank you for the presentation and for the sort of the story of the development of the project, and the scale of it is, I mean, it's super exciting to have something of this scale to look at, but it is also a little daunting to be thinking about something of this size. And I think that my reaction, based on the elevations that, or the evolution rather, that you've presented today, is I really like the direction of the base in this iteration. I think it, in the previous iteration, it was feeling kind of spare at the bottom, and so that the weightiness of the top imbalance of the base of the building felt a little off, a little uncomfortable to me in terms of that relationship of scale. But I really like this. I really like the relationship to the historic streetscape and the kind of the rhythm and nature of the base. What I think still I'd like to see is I really was enjoying the articulation of the upper levels in some of the previous schemes, particularly with the use of color and depth. So yeah, thank you. So I feel like I understand where you're headed and why, but it does feel now that the sort of sameness as you go up into those higher levels is feeling kind of heavy, and not the articulation between the residential and the offices is not as clear to me.
Yeah, I kind of
but I
kind of downplayed it to, and yeah, the idea was just trying to make the building feel a little more unified, because it was feeling a little fragmented to me. But I
I hear what you're
I do
saying.
understand what you're saying.
And
It's this weird balance between the two.
Yeah, I think just as it moves, it's so challenging, because then the piece with the parking garage, I liked again, kind of the rhythm and articulation of the previous one, so that there was a less of a monolithic feel at the parking garage level. Yeah, in that one, there's more vertical lines, at least in this rendering, that sort of break up that band of the parking garage. But I understand this is a work in progress, and that it's a challenging design problem to balance all of those uses at a scale of this size. With very, there's a lot of other precedents that we can build from as we go up 18 stories. So, but those are just some initial thoughts, and really recognizing the work that you've done to date.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
I've got a couple. You know me. Michael, I actually like the blue version tons better than the one that we were presented with. I'm glad you're upscaling it, because when the first floor went to the squat thing, it kind of looked like, you know, I don't know, a suburban post office, kind of squatched. So I think that higher level that has more differentiation, most pedestrians will view it from basically the first 2 floors will be their experience. So I hope that there is a fair amount of articulation in that particular area, because that will be how people really experience it. The upper floors are what people will see from a distance as they're driving in or out of town.
Right.
I agree with the wedding cake concept. It there for a while, it was starting to look like, you know, a strip mall with a prison on top of it, with a suburban office park with the upper part of Tucson House stuck on top, and there was absolutely no continuity whatsoever that all the earlier iterations. I hope you continue to add and reinforce some sort of vertical component that is a bridging gap, even if you want to differentiate the uses of the floors. So the building will be seen as a total entity instead of a wedding cake of diverse parts. I was looking at this one's a lot better. So if it's now 18, it's not 239 anymore. This has been all over the map.
Yeah, no, it's 240. It's 240 right now.
It's 240 right now. Okay. I did have one concern. It looks like the west facade will be touching the Wigorama building, and I have concerns when it actually touches it. Will it be at least separated by 3 feet?
We're working on that.
Okay.
It's really tight. Let me show you.
I mean, if it does connect to it, that's fine, but it will bring in a different layer of review. And
so our intent right now is to not touch it, and it's just the site is so tight.
Yeah.
What you can see here is that's the property line, and the Wigorama is on the property line. So we've actually cut this corner out. Part of the reason we cut it out was to really pull back from the edge of the Wigorama. So it's not 3 feet right now, it's more like 1.5 feet, but we're seeing what we can do, you know, to be able to do this without affecting the Wigorama building any more than we need to.
I just threw that 3 feet out because I think that's fire code.
Yeah, we don't have 3 feet, that's the problem.
Okay. And the other thing that I'm still kind of confused at, I went to the last neighborhood meeting you have, and I like the way it connects to Congress, but I'll want to see the Congress Street facades and how it connects in. And you were talking about activating the space and maybe putting in some landscaping and so on and so forth, which I'm not seeing. But now looking at the latest iteration of that first floor, I'm not sure how inviting that's going to be if, you know, humming transformers and generators and all that sort of stuff, if they're not baffled and enclosed, are really going to be. Is it going to feel like, you know, the backside of the Wells Fargo bank?
Yep. No, we're on the same page. That's a concern for all of us. So, okay, you know, how we acoustically separate that, you know, how we detail these enclosures so that, you know, it doesn't feel like a utility, you know, basically a bunch of utilities, which is what it is. I mean, this stuff has to go somewhere. So I think it's really a design problem, you know, how we really articulate this section of the north facade. And it could be we can introduce some small planting areas. You know, we're looking at what we can do. We're also just trying to figure out how we fit this stuff in there, because it is a really tight site.
Yeah.
But we are totally on the same page that the most important thing in this space is going to be that pedestrian experience, because that's what's really going to help make this project work.
Maybe sound baffles or something, because nobody wants a 70 decibel hum from a transformer back there.
Absolutely.
I was looking at some of the review comments, and Donovan was going on and on about compact spaces. The parking's gone from 500 to 489 to X to whatever, but 130 are compact spaces, which aren't legal spaces. Right. How are you planning on addressing that? And the other thing in the parking, I see currently there seems to be 20 EV chargers, but by the time this building is built, and if you've got 134 tenants and some office workers driving, in 10 years, you could have 90% electric vehicles that need a charge.
Sure.
So you want to look at increasing that.
Yes, and increasing it, and that really, the main component of that is to increase the electrical service to be able to handle those charging stations. So that's something we're evaluating.
Okay.
To address the compact space issue, what's happening, and you can kind of see it right here. We have columns that end up in the front end of our parking spaces. So it's really a depth reduction to 16 feet in some of the parking spaces. This scheme, we were trying to avoid doing that, but we lost a lot of parking stalls. We went down to like 450 something. So we're still going to keep the compact spaces in. The way it works from the IPP perspective, at least this is what Nick's been telling me, is that we can't count those towards our total provided parking. So when we write our parking plan, it will have to be based on the smaller amount of just the spaces that comply with the dimensional standards. So we have to factor that into our IPP when we do our parking calculations.
Well, anybody in a Honda will be fine, but if you got a
Right.
Cadillac or a big truck, it's just not going to work.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they'll be signed. I know people park in them anyway, but we think providing the additional stalls is, even if they're compact stalls, is probably going to be a bigger benefit than reducing the amount of parking we have in the garage.
Okay.
Michael, is there an option on that? I mean, do you still get the benefit from those additional stalls? I mean, it seems kind of counterintuitive that we're trying to promote less vehicle traffic, more pedestrian circulation, more downtown urban growth, but we can't count parking spaces because they're 2 feet shorter, even though most people are driving smaller cars.
Yeah, so I guess the way I look at this is those additional 50 stalls will still be there, then they'll still be used, and they can still rent them. It's more of a procedural issue with getting the IPP approved in terms of what our baseline parking is versus what we're actually proposing. So I think from a functional perspective, it doesn't change what we're doing. It just changes the way we have to do our study for our IPP.
Okay.
One other quickie on the retail, you said it's now at 22 feet. Would that allow you the potential for building mezzanine space if more floor space is needed for a tenant?
Yes, and that's exactly what we were thinking by increasing it. So if you had a tenant like a Urban Outfitters or even like a Walgreens, they could go in there and build a mezzanine.
Okay. Yeah, that would be preferable. It also doesn't, it looks better proportionately.
Sure.
So you're just looking at the corner two bedroom apartments having balconies for the entire building except for the top floor roof decks.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
In this project, are you looking to do gray water and or rainwater usage at all? I know you're tight on space, but
we've talked about it in terms of rainwater collection. We just don't have that much landscaping to irrigate. So we're doing some passive water harvesting at the street level, but we haven't really gotten into a stormwater collection system or gray water collection system because we don't really have a use for all that water.
yeah, honestly, with the size building, you could wrap the whole building. You could wrap the whole block, knowing that the owner owns the entire block. I mean, that might be an option, but I understand your concern and issues with that. But I guess the idea that we try to promote even the use of the gray water from the chiller system or something like that would be ideal.
We
also
do
that space. So
yeah. Well, we also have it's getting I don't want to get in the weeds too far, but through the financing arm, we are required to provide a certain amount of green building features. So we're still determining what those are. So a harvesting system or gray water system may end up on that list because we have to provide it. But we're not quite there yet in terms of what the specific green amenities we're providing for the building to meet that financing requirement.
When you do this,
have some differentiation between the residential and the commercial or office space below it, because I look at the latest concept and I find it just there's nothing there that does that. And I think the previous design you showed us had some interest, but not necessarily that, but it just seems like it all melds together. And I look all the way up buildings. I don't go just to the first 2 floors. And so I'm wondering what can be done to maybe just have a differentiation between the residential and the office space.
Sure, and that's sometimes these design iterations it's like a pendulum, right? You go too far one way and too far the other. So we're still trying to find that sweet spot in the middle. So, and I appreciate the comment because it's, you know, on the one hand, I thought maybe we were going too far with all the color in the previous game. So this was sort of a reaction to that to kind of tone the building down and unify it again. But I think, you know, I mean, based on this feedback, I think obviously, I think we're sharing the idea that that differentiation between those uses is probably helpful for the overall building composition.
And another question I have is, given what's going on in office spaces and a lot of companies moving away, doing remote offices, can any of these floors be converted to another use at some point in the future if that does occur with this project?
So yes, we could, you know, they could be converted to residential floors similar to the ones above. You know, the way these work, you need to stack the units, so your plumbing shaft stack and all that work. So we could plan for that in the future if they wanted to convert this fully to a residential development.
Okay.
What we're hearing though is while office, you know, the office environment may change, there's still a really strong need and desire for these large floor plate offices in downtown. So we're optimistic that the demand for this kind of a space is going to be high enough that will, you know, this will lease up pretty quickly.
And Michael, that's Class A office.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. No intention of like R&D or innovation space or anything like that on any of those levels.
I mean, I think the ownership group is probably open to any tenants that want to come in.
But there's not any specialized building support for those kinds of things.
No, there's not.
Noted. Yeah. Yeah. That I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Michael?
Yeah, a quick one. When you're choosing screening elements for the parking garage, is there any way to do louvers or something like that so all the people down on the street and the buildings across the street aren't looking basically at the bottom of a fluorescent light fixture? I mean, El Centro looks like a shoe factory when you come into town. So I hope you hope you do something to mitigate that particular element.
Yeah.
And there, it's funny, the pendulum is here on this board too. Is there any way to differentiate through color or window rhythm or whatever the different uses while still keeping a cohesive overall unity to the building through maybe structural form, like some sort of vertical elements?
Mm-hmm.
If the floors have a different elevation per se, I think that balance would be probably helpful. But
yeah, I think you know, these blue elements were an initial effort at that. You know, whether we accentuate the column lines, there may be some other ways to have that vertical unity and allow the kind of horizontal uses to be a little more differentiated.
okay, yeah, I think a balance would be good. That's it for me though. Keep going on it.
Yeah, thanks.
The overall concept's fine.
Yep. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be back soon.
Thank you.
See you in 3 weeks.
Thanks. Sounds good.
Okay, next item on the agenda is call the audience. Doesn't appear we have any. Then future agenda items, Nick.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we do have actually just this week, we did receive a new application for a larger mixed use building on the west side called the Bautista. They have just scheduled for a pre-submittal, so we do expect that to be coming your way probably in the next few months. In terms of other active IID projects, though, I think that's kind of the only one that's on the horizon. but we will certainly keep you informed as soon as we hear more activity coming your way.
And Nick, where in the west side are you speaking of?
Yeah, so it is just east of the Gadsden development. It's adjacent to the Santa Cruz River, so near over by Caterpillar there.
Okay. Great. And if that's it, then.
Can I ask a question of Nick, just for future reference?
Sure.
We have a call to the audience. Are audience members allowed to participate and speak during this meeting? There's mayor and council have that, a couple of others do, but other boards do not. And I was just wondering what, I assume because this is city manager, we can allow it because it's not city clerk's purview?
Are you referring to speaking to items that are on the agenda?
No. Is the format of this particular meeting that if people from the audience did wish to speak, they would be allowed to? Some meetings don't allow that.
Correct, yes. The call to the audience item is consistent with other board and commission meetings. Although this isn't directly driven by the clerk's office, we do include that in this agenda as well.
Okay.
So Mr. Burr, members of the DRC, this is not a public hearing. It's a meeting open to the general public.
Okay.
So those who attend that are not the applicant, they can observe, and it's up to the chair of the DRC to allow them to express any opinion. But the purview of the DRC is based on what is included in the requirements per the UDC.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Maria.
That's it.
Any other business? Not, the meeting's adjourned.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.